Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 27. With the last few remaining rail segments getting close to completion, today's focus will be mostly on the railroad side of things. More specifically, we will place the signals, fix a station that I messed up, and connect the Satsumograd steel mill to the rest of the network. We will also deal with the personal cars a little more, making sure we have as much variety as possible. Apart from those, we will do a tiny amount of landscaping in Estergrad, but that's about it. First, let's make sure all the rail segments are properly set for electrification. I completely forgot about the lower customs house, so let's take care of it. And just to be on the safe side, let's go over the entire local network, and make sure everything is taken care of. In the last episode, I mentioned that we should name the two track layers Red Star and Blue Moon. Let me do it real quick, before I forget. Also, you might notice that there is no sound in the footage today, only the music I put under it in the video editor. I messed up the OBS sound channel settings when recording the latest showcase video. Sorry about that. Since we are still waiting for things to complete on the railroad, I decided to spend a little bit of time on the town. We still have a couple flower beds to place, and an out-of-place monument to demolish. Also, these two new houses are still sporting the old paint jobs, so let's fix that too. Next, they should get the obligatory flower beds next to the front doors. Good thing I decided to place them now, instead of waiting until the trees and bushes have been planted. I keep making that mistake, but not today. And here come the bushes and trees. Ah yes. This one. It feels really out of place. If the asphalt textures weren't there, it would look quite nice with some trees around it, but these are meant to be centerpieces for roundabouts, and for that, they are great. And since I had many issues when I tried to remove baked-in ground textures in the past, I didn't want to risk it, so I just got rid of the whole thing. We can just replace it with something traditional, like this mural. We had quite a bit of space left in the car park, so I decided to buy a couple more. This time, I made sure to buy them with different colors, whenever possible. I also bought a couple extra trabants, just as temporary fillers. Next on the agenda was the steel mill's rail connection. We needed one, so we could get rid of as much road traffic as possible. The most logical place for this was at the coal pickup station. We could just use that as a branch-off point. Dealing with the rest of the tracks was a whole other can of worms. The steel mill is on a pretty tall hill, and there was no way for us to build a gentle slope this time. The only thing I could do is to play around with the terrain tools until we reach a semi-satisfactory result. Good thing the old leveling tool was still available. This was the original way of leveling terrain. It just goes for whatever the cursor is pointing at any given moment. The new one remembers the starting height, but the old one does not. Coupling it with the smoothing tool is a decent way to make sudden changes in elevation a bit more gradual, by making them longer. Far from the most ideal slope, I would much prefer if the contour lines were all white at the very least. But we have to work with what we're given, even if it was given to us by my poor planning from the past. And there was no way we could build overpasses here. Thankfully, both the road and the railroad traffic should be relatively low around here. Personally, I don't mind a couple level crossings. I didn't notice it at the time, but that was the notification that a much requested personal car just got released to the market. The Fiat 126P. We will definitely replace those filler Trabants with this one later, don't worry. And that's the rail track going up to the steel mill. I'm really not happy with this one, way too steep for my liking, but given the circumstances, not much we could do about it, unless we were prepared to create a ludicrously long side branch. I prefer using gentle slopes whenever possible, but even I have to bow down to practicality sometime. And would you look at that? Only a small crossing is left of the grand electrification campaign. Well, not counting the new steel mill branch, but we will deal with that separately. Oh, right. Also this. But it will be done real quick. And looking at the 2 storage tanks at the refinery, it was about time we started setting up some deliveries. I started with the most obvious, the coal for the power plant. I expected to see the delivery train spring to life for a second, but then I remembered that the trucks already managed to fill that storage up to 100%, so nothing will be done until it drops below 80%, where I decided to set the drop-off threshold. There it is. The penny drops. All we need to do is park the coal trucks in the road depot, and let the train take care of it. Also, we don't really need this line anymore, so we can delete it. Speaking of lines, we should give a name to the new commuter line going to the power station. The next thing I wanted to take care of was the gravel deliveries. Another thing, we should be moving around in massive quantities, instead of wasting a lot of fuel on making small deliveries at a time with trucks. And this is where the next issue reared its ugly head. I keep forgetting that adding conveyor towers between stations and storages is a bad idea when it comes to using distribution offices. Before I decided to do something about it, I just went ahead and added the third delivery, namely moving fuel and bitumen from Ramesov to Kirkimov. Now, this is the delivery route I was absolutely sure should be working without issues. No pumps between stations and storages, enough room in Kirkimov to do the trip, and yet, the train was sitting idle. And no, it was not because the delivery office had no power. That's just for the fuel pumps, we are using electric locomotives. It was all because of the lack of signals. My guess is that the track layers reserve the whole network for themselves. The only way to be sure was to start placing those signals. So, in case you haven't watched my old signal tutorial video, here's a quick crash course on how to organize the signals on your network. I like to follow 3 golden rules, which I learned while watching tutorials for Factorio. Rule number 1. Place chain signals at the entrances to junctions, facing into the junction. Rule number 2. Regular block signals go at the exits, facing away from the junction. And rule number 3. After each exit signal, always make sure that the following blocks are long enough to accommodate the length of every train that uses the network. You do not want any cars staying inside the junction block, in case the leaving train get held up in the exit block for some reason. By the way, since the first signal went down, the distributor train is on its way to make its first delivery. But we don't have time to admire that, we have signals to place. Apart from those 3 golden rules, there are other, lesser rules a new railroad engineer should keep in mind. 1. Is that signal blocks have colors, and those colors have meanings. The blues are what I call queue blocks. They have a single entrance, and a single exit. That's where trains can queue in case the next block is occupied. Orange blocks are junctions. They have multiple entrances and exits, they need to be organized in a way, so if a train enters, it needs to leave immediately. The last thing you want is a train sitting idle inside a junction, blocking anyone else from entering. That's why we use chain signals as entrances. Those kinds of signals look forward along the train's path, and only let them through if their exit block is free. If it's occupied, then the signal will not let them enter the junction. That way, trains can only enter a junction if they can leave immediately after. And you might have seen me placing mixed signals, with one side being a regular block signal, and the other being a chain signal. Those are useful around stations. If you place a station crossing before the platform, you can place a chain signal at the incoming lane, a regular one at the exit lane, and 2 mixed ones in front of the platforms, with the chain side facing into the crossing junction, and the regular one facing into the station platform. That turns the platforms into 2-way tracks, allowing trains to leave the same way they entered, using the crossing to get into the proper lane as they leave. It's a bit unfortunate that I managed to reach this explanation when the gravel station was on the screen. I just happened to be doing this the wrong way. I'll fix it later, so let's move on. This big junction has enough room inside to allow some of the longer arms to be queue blocks, so later on in the episode, we will come back to it, and fine-tune it a little. Apart from blue and orange blocks, you might have noticed some purple, and even green blocks. Those are bad news, and should be avoided whenever possible. They basically signify that 2 junctions are right next to each other, only separated by a signal. Junctions should always be separated by a blue queue block. If that cannot be achieved, then the best option is to merge the 2 junctions together. This queue block is only 115 meters long, not the optimal 150 meters. Let's hope it won't be a problem in the future. Although, given that the previous block is a merging junction, a train that's too long should only result in a small inefficiency, not a critical blockage. And here's a better example of the use of mixed signals. One-way signals go at the entrance and exit of the junction, and mixed signals go in front of the station platforms, with the chain side facing toward the crossing. As always, chain facing in, regular facing out. The big junction is still purple, since the Utegrad branch is full of junctions, meaning there are 2 junctions only separated by a single signal on each lane. Very bad news. But as soon as a blue Q block was introduced in between the two, suddenly the problem went away. Now, there is a small thing. We have a crossing in front of the stations dealing with the coal, wood, and steel, and we have a junction inside the steel branch, meaning that we will have a purple block on the network in the end. But since only a single train will ever use the steel stations branch, hopefully it won't be a problem. This is an extremely rare exception to the orange-purple rule. Technically, it's a problem, but only technically, since it would only become a real problem if more than one train was allowed to enter that side branch. Now, let's make this big unwieldy junction a bit more efficient. As I've said, some of the tracks inside it are long enough to act as Q blocks. This means we can break the overall junction into small ones, acting independently from each other. Except this one. This is too short, and we'll have to have the two neighboring junctions act as a single block. There. We managed to turn a single massive junction into three smaller ones. The only area remaining is the one around the distribution offices. I included that temporary crossing for the sake of giving the track layers access to both sides of the coastal rail tracks. Once those are all done, this crossing will be deleted. We just need to make sure to add a mixed signal, so these tracks can be used in both directions while they are under construction. And this is the last one. As it turns out, it's also one of the more problematic ones. It was a bit of a pain to make the nodes cooperate. I was really trying to make the signals line up nice and neat. Thankfully, I did manage in the end. And there we go. All the junctions all signaled up. But we are not done yet. Remember that gravel drop-off station? This is where I decided to fix it for good. Having this conveyor tower messes with the delivery logic, since if there is no direct connection, the station cannot see how full the storage is. The only way to fix it is to get rid of the tower, and for that, we need to rebuild the whole setup. Thankfully, it's a relatively easy fix. The problem comes from the road. The aggregate conveyor inputs on the storage are not high enough to leave a suitable clearance for the road. So, if the input is just barely too low, we can deal with it by also elevating the output on the train station. So we just need to rebuild it, but this time, on a hill. There, did you see? We had a couple positions where the conveyor belts could connect. Now we know that this height for the hill is tall enough. We can now concentrate on making it look nice. Nope, this position is not good. Let's try again. Bingo. As long as we have a connection, I'm happy. And since the station itself has a ridiculous ramp on it, I'm not all that bothered about the slope in this instance. We only deleted a part of the incoming tracks, so we can just reconnect those stubs, and we're good again. Although, I would still prefer to make this slope as smooth as possible. Sure, it's steep, But that's no excuse to make it bumpy as well. Hey, this looks good. There is a dip right in front of the station, but the tracks themselves are pretty smooth. Hooray for the built-in embankments. I wish roads had these. And we might as well go for electrified tracks right away, they are all individual segments. And would you look at that, we have $600K in the bank. Time to repay some loans. Although, later in the episode, I will decide to buy the stuff for the second distribution office, so repaying this loan might have been a bit hasty. While we were busy with the signals, the train was busy filling up the Kirchhoff storages. The bitumen is over half full now. Oh, right. We need a road for the station to be built. Maybe a dirt road will be enough. So, next comes the Q blocks. Some of them are way too long, and we can break them up into smaller segments, so more than one train can wait in them. At this point, I was not really concerned about measuring the exact 150 meters needed for the exit blocks. I guess we will just adjust things if we run into trouble along the way. Alright, the track layers managed to reach the steel mill. Once all the segments are done, we can deal with the electrification. And the gravel station's tracks are also coming along nicely. Won't be long now, and we can set this one up properly. And I just noticed that the town distribution branch can act as a small turnaround if necessary. A lucky little accident. Maybe I should try to introduce similar turnaround locations on some of the other branches too. Just in case. Especially around the distribution offices. Not sure how to do them just yet, I will need to take a look at the surrounding area to make a decision. We could just use those small ones we used around Mikhailovia in the last series. Looking at the population statistics, things seem to be going okay. No major issues I can see, and the education system seemed to be doing a good job too. As usual, as long as the uneducated citizens are mostly coming from the newborn babies, we are in a good place. And this is where I decided to go deeper into the personal car situation. The current car park was completely full, and we had a list of cars that was all over the place. First, I wanted to trim down on the cars that we had too much of. Basically, I wanted to have 2 of each model, preferably with different colors whenever possible, and then fill in the remaining parking slots with the Maluks. Since the list of them in the car park itself was very disorganized, I decided to use the dedicated vehicle ledger instead. Ah yes. Much better. I only needed to keep in mind that we had 2 of these T603s in the secret police HQ, so we shouldn't sell those. Next, I wanted to see how far we were from the NATO border. I wanted to buy a couple Beetles too, but we just so happened to live in the exact farthest possible corner of the map. Unfortunate, but I guess those will have to wait. So, let's make sure we have 2 of each model. That should do it. I didn't check today, but hopefully I will remember to double check the colors in the next episode. Also, since we were at it, might as well buy 2 more cars for the secret police. And we had enough money to repay another loan. Only one remained at the time, but as I've said before, we will end up taking out another one to afford the next set of trains. And there we go. The gravel drop-off station is ready to go. Except for the signals. I think the ones going to the station should be mixed ones. I was a bit indecisive for a second there, but then I just went for it. This means that we can set up the deliveries. Right now, we only have a single train doing 3 jobs, and it is very busy delivering the liquid goods to Kirkhamov at the moment. But as we increase the stable of locomotives, this will be less of a problem. I was hoping it would go for a gravel delivery next, but it's still laser focused on moving the bitumen around. And this is where I decided to buy the next train. It will have the same exact set of wagons, but it will use the other distribution office. The one we use now is responsible for the distribution of goods, while the other one will deal with the exports. Since we want to have a stockpile ready to go at any given moment, we need to separate the 2 jobs between 2 offices. And that's it. We have the new locomotive moving the wagons to the second office. How about we take a couple leisurely rides on this new train, before we end the episode? I really wanted to have these wagons delivered before I ended the episode, even though my alarm was blaring at me. Also, I just remembered that the steel branch must be done by now, and sure enough, it was. Time to electrify it. This is the second delivery of wagons. Only one more left. Alright. Time to pick up those last 2 hopper cars. We were looking to the left on the last ride. How about we look to the right this time around? These trees are really messing with the view of the town. Maybe I should thin out the forest a little in the next episode. Okay, before we leave, let's just quickly set up an export line. Maybe for the products coming out of the oil refinery. A 50% threshold for the pickup seems reasonable. We are dealing in bigger quantities now, so we should keep a bigger stockpile at the ready. In the next episode, we should make sure to get rid of some of the truck-based distribution and exporting. At this point, we are pretty much ready to start building the coastal rail tracks. In fact, let's get started on it right now, and we can watch it get built in the next episode. And that's pretty much it for today. Next time, we will most likely deal with more organizing around the new railroad distribution. We still need to add the steel mill and the wood. And we need to get rid of the road-based distribution for these goods. We could also set up some importing, keeping a bigger stockpile of building materials in Kirkimov. And once that's all done, we can turn our attention to the town once more. We need to build out the rest of the island, so we can have enough workers to do the jobs in the surrounding industries. I suspect the coastal tracks will take at least 4 episodes to complete, mostly thanks to the tunnels, and once that's done, we can start building a second construction outpost. After that, we can start thinking about a second city, this time with rail-based transportation in mind. But that's for much later. We need to focus on Estergrad for now. We have plenty of room left, and we need to build it out entirely, if we ever want to call the city complete. Anyways, thank you for watching. If you liked the video, then leaving a like and subscribing to the channel just might motivate me to make more. If you are more in the donating mood, you can find a link to my Ko-fi page in the description, where you can buy me a glass of water. I don't really drink coffee. Thank you for your support, and until next time, I will see you later.